The session you're in is online education, best practices for support and retention. So what we're going to talk about today are four main things. We're going to talk about issues that we have with online learners in terms of retention and support. And I'm going to tell you 10 ways that I've been through to support and retain online learners. And we're going to talk about whose responsibility it is for our students to succeed. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about analytics. Actually, that'll be integrated in there and how to use those. My name is Melanie Clay. I'm responsible for online learning, continuing education, off-campus programs at the University of West Georgia and have been since 1996. And I'm also the Dean of USG ECOR, which is the collaborative core curriculum that has 8 affiliate institutions in Georgia, and we've done so I'm kind of going to bounce back and forth between those. We've done some really good work with ECOR, and there's some reasons why we've been able to do more with ECOR than we have our online programs at West Georgia, our general programs. But and I'll kind of tell you some of those differences and how things that we do with collaborative programs we can try to better integrate with our on-campus programs. Who was in my presentation yesterday? Anybody? Okay. All right, so there's going to be a little overlap, so be patient about that. It's not the same presentation, but there's definitely some overlap, particularly with the questions that got asked yesterday. And I would say, well, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, but anyway, and we talked about them some yesterday. Let's look at some of the problems with online learning in general. Historically, attrition has been at 50% or higher, and sometimes it's actually a lot higher at some institutions, but that's basically what we're dealing with. 50% is too high, and that's basically withdrawal rates. We're not even talking about ABCs and success. We're looking just flat out, is this student going to get through this course in any form or fashion? And are they going to stay in the program? There's a lot of feelings of isolation in the online environment, and that's something we can actually affect through proper instructional design, assignments, and instructor behaviors. But it's not an easy thing to do, and it's something that we always have to improve on. Now, how many people in this class have actually taken an online, in this session, have taken an online class before? Raise your hands. Okay, so most of you have. How many of you have not? Okay, well, that's really good that most people have. I think that's very important. I would like to see a time as we go through our Complete College Georgia initiatives that everybody in the entire system who's employed as a faculty member or a staff member, any sort of support level whatsoever, takes an online course. I think it's very important when you are, and I would like for that online course to be about things like Complete College Georgia. I know I'm getting a little on track here, but I would love to see a 2-week online program that everybody in the entire system had to take that was about these Complete College Georgia initiatives and how everyone in whatever role they're in can affect those. And if it's delivered, and they get some little certificate for doing that, maybe a big certificate. If that happens, they'll also have the experience of being an online student if the course is properly designed, and they'll understand those stresses and what it feels like and how you can feel isolated. All right, so another problem that we see for the online learner in our online courses is poor course design. And that's not because somebody tried to make it a poor course. It's because they're trying to just take their traditional class and dump it into the online environment. And they're not thinking about creative ways to really have the synergy that you need to make these students engage. So these are the common problems. There's a lot of misconceptions about online learning by faculty and by the online learners themselves. And one of these, of course, is students thinking, oh, this is easy. I can go to Panama City, take this class, no big deal, do whatever you do all day on the beach as a college student and get through this. And that doesn't work. They're typically not any easier. I would argue that ECOR courses are harder than the average online course. And then we also have atypical populations that we're dealing with, and they're usually not one population, okay? There are lots of different atypical populations. Let's switch in a little bit to ECOR here, and I told you I'd talk about this. This is an example of the success that we've had. This is just in terms of course completion. We're working very hard right now on ABCs, but we started, our first efforts were to work on course completion. This is overall across all the affiliates. In 2007, we had 71% course completion rates, and by 2011, that had moved up to 84%. I just received word yesterday that we're around 93% for this summer. Summer's always higher, but that's by far, that's way exceeds face-to-face courses. So that's a very big deal, and it shows you that we can do this in the online environment. We can do it as well. We can do it as better. We can do it better. And it also makes us wonder, when should we start taking some of the practices that we've been doing in online learning and mainstreaming them across the campus, okay? This is just the University of West Georgia's ECOR completion. This goes back a little bit further, and it's a little bit more dramatic because we did not, at West Georgia, have administrative responsibility for ECOR until 3 years ago. But at West Georgia, we started efforts with our own ECOR students sooner and then expanded those into the whole ECOR population. All right, let's talk about whose responsibility it is. Whose responsibility is it? Who thinks it's mostly the student's responsibility to do well in their class? Oh, wow, y'all have really been drinking the Kool-Aid. That's good. Okay, support team. Who thinks it's mostly the support team's responsibility? All right, who thinks it's instructional designer? And who thinks it's mostly the instructors? Okay, so I guess most of you think it's all of them, right? You're kind of getting that right. It's all of them. It's every single one of them. Is anybody confused about who doesn't have a role in this? All right, obviously, our traditional thinking says, I'm the instructor, I'm old and I know stuff, and I'm going to stand here and tell you it like I'm kind of doing right now, and then you're going to take a test and you pass it or you fail it, and that's the end of it, and I don't really even know your name. Well, that's not working anymore. All right, here's the 10 things. Let me tell you one other thing. I thought I had adapted a slide, but I think it has gotten lost in our technology stuff up here. Let me tell you one thing before I move forward. We know out of 10 students that one of them is going to fail or withdraw no matter what we do. No matter what we do, there's one. Now, the problem is we can't figure out which one that is right off the bat. But there's one. We have students that we will call and reach out to, and they will say, stop calling me. I don't want to do well in this class. I mean, they'll actually tell you that, and we'll go, oh, that's that one. You know, so we know all the others aren't that one. You know, you don't know why. Are they trying to do something with financial aid? You know, are they trying to please somebody in their family by acting like they're going to school? There's one person who's not going to make it. There's 5 people who are going to succeed, get an A or a B or a C, no matter what obstacles we put in their way, okay? There's 4 others that we're working on. It's those 4 others where we make a difference in these numbers and in these lives. Now, number one, I'm going to go over 10 things like I said. Number 1 is to create an entire student success culture, and this is a really, really big deal, and it's not little, and it's not, you know, just coming to a training session and talking about it and putting it in your strategic plan. It is like breathing, okay? It is everything you do. It is relentless. It is, you know, almost desperate. Oh, my goodness, somebody's going to withdraw from my class. Oh, no, they're going to not do, you know, it's almost becomes like your own child in a sense. Everyone is really trying to keep each and every student in the class and remove the obstacles to make them successful. And we're working on those 4 students. We've got to try to figure out who those 4 students out of 10, if you have a class of 30, you've got 12 of them. And you'll know probably by the second week of class who those 12 are. And those are the students that you as a faculty member, as an advisor, as a student support person, as an administrator, whatever, as an admissions, whatever your job is, you are looking for these students and you are trying to help them any way that you can. And this starts when we move all the way back to the beginning, when we're in the enrollment process. There's so much that happens with students who want to explore college and they get cut off right in the enrollment process. At West Georgia, we hired, I guess, a couple of years ago, an employee in my area who was actually attending Darton as a non-traditional student. And he lives in Carrollton, and I said, why didn't you attend West Georgia? And he said, I could not figure out anything on the website, and I just gave up. So, and we see that it's, you know, it's the website, it's the people, it's right when we first bring them in the door. So student success begins even before they even knock on our door. It starts on the website. It starts in our promotional materials. It starts in how easy do we make it for them to get enrolled. Okay, do you call financial aid and you can't get anybody to answer? Does it take 2 or 3 or 4 days for somebody to call you back? Those things are big problems and they can't happen anymore. All right, so we have to get rid of the stupid policies and the poor service. The second thing we do is create gated orientations. Now, I'll tell you how we do this in ECOR, and there's other ways to do this as well. When you're looking at online learners, they have to know what they're getting into. And you think, well, it says here in the bulletin what they're doing. It says here on the syllabus that we posted online. It tells them in all these other places that we put it on the website. Guess what? They're still not getting it. We did focus groups, and we found that they weren't getting it. Even though we had sent them packets of information and it was on the website, they weren't getting it. So what we did was we said, we are creating this, online orientation. They basically look at 10 or 15. Look, there comes the ECOR enrollment manager right now, Craig Brown. Hi, Craig. So anyway, we tell them everything they need to know, like that they will never see their instructor, because we found out in the focus groups and in our telephone surveys that they didn't necessarily know this. They thought, I thought I would see them a couple times. They didn't know they had to take 2 proctored exams or 1 proctored exam. They didn't know that they had to buy their books somewhere else, and that's really, really big deal when they don't know that. They have to get them through an online book service. They can't go to Valdosta State University bookstore, and they didn't understand this, or at least 4 of the 10 didn't understand this, okay? 5 of them got it, 1 of them didn't care, but the other 4 did not really get all of these little pieces. So all of these details, they didn't understand that they needed to really log on every day, even if only for 5 or 10 minutes. That was a whole lot better than logging on once a week for 2 or 3 hours. It really is a whole lot better if you've ever taken a lot of online classes. Who's taught online courses? Oh, we have so many. Okay. So as a faculty member, if you even miss a day, how awful it is. I mean, you like personally feel lost. I know that I do. I feel very lost if I don't. I can log in just for a few minutes, and it's so much better than missing that whole day. So we have to get that across to students. It's just wonderful to do that. So we have to dispel these misconceptions before they come to class. And what we do is they go through these slides, and then they have a little quiz that they take, and it's all automated. To a degree, all automated to a degree. They take this quiz, and if they get them all right, then Banner allows them to go in and register for the course. And if they miss something, then they get another chance. If they miss too many, then they don't get another chance, and they get a phone call, okay? And an advisor will talk them through it and see if this is really the right thing for them, find out why they went all the way through all those slides and still couldn't answer the quiz, and they make a decision together about whether this student should even proceed with this type of learning, whether it's the best thing for them or if there's something that we can just help them understand. This one piece made a huge difference, okay? This was one of the first things that we did, and it brought the points up like 4 or 5 points right off the bat. So, and we continually change it for ECOR. We have different versions of it for different institutions. Okay, so, but there's all kinds of ways you can do something like that, but you really have to make the student prove that they know what they're getting into. And when I'm talking about this, realize that I'm talking about undergraduate students. Graduate students are a whole different ballgame. We're not having to deal with most of these issues. In that maybe if we're starting to see some doctoral programs, you're going to have a different type of issues. But most of what I'm talking about today is going to be your undergraduate students, particularly freshmen and sophomores. Okay, so what they do is they take the brief orientation, they take the quiz, and the orientation opens. The third thing that we need to do, and this is about student support and about your course, and you probably know this if you've taught online, that information should be provided in small chunks, and it should be redundant. And that is important in your courses when you're telling them, giving them information, and it's also important when we're doing student support. Like we might send out an email that says, you need to sign up for your proctored midterm by Friday. This is a reminder, okay? But we're not going to tell them you need to sign up for your midterm, and you need to sign up for your final, and you need to remember to fill out your evaluations, and you need to check on your financial aid, and you tell them one little thing at a time. And then we send it out through Facebook, and we send it out through Twitter, and we send it out through the class. We send it out every different way we can at different times and different ways, okay? That makes a difference as well. This is the biggie, and I'm going to talk a good bit about this, and I'm really going to focus mostly on ECOR. And what we do in ECOR is a very, very resource-intensive strategy, and it involves the faculty, and it involves the support team, and it is a very big deal. Craig Brown's sitting back there. He can tell you it every single day. I mean, it's high energy. Somebody sends out an email and says, here is our course withdrawal rate on April 15th, 2012. Here's what it was on April 15th, 2011. Here's what it was on April 15th, 2010. And if it is not better, then we're going to be having a round of email discussions for the next 3 hours, and we're going to be looking at it institution by institution. We're going to be saying, what's wrong? How are we going to improve this? Who's not? Then I'll say, let me see it by person who's making these phone calls. You want to look at individual data, and we will figure out what's going on. We will look and see if the demographics are wrong. It very rarely happens that it's not moving up, but if for some reason it's down one day, there is sheer panic in our office, and that's how it should be. And we usually find out what's going on and are able to get, because we like to see those numbers moving up. We're not going to be very happy until those numbers are consistently at 90% at every institution across the board, across all 3 semesters, 90 or above. Because remember, there's one that we can't do anything about. But if those other 4, we can, no matter what's going on with them. So how do we do this? Step 1 is, there's a faculty member right there, teaches ECOR, Christine James. She sends to us every single week. Is that Monday that you send that? Okay, all right. Okay, so the particular day, she fills out a form, and she's for students who have either missed an assignment, who have poor grades, or who haven't showed up this week, or she has some kind of concern about them. Usually at this point in time, she's already tried to contact them as well. All right, she's either contacted them by email. Hopefully she's made a phone call, because phone calls are big. Getting on the phone with an online student is very, very important when they are at risk. And this is not in my presentation, but it is now. I would add, when I've taught online courses, I have gone a step further and actually tried to call every single one of them during the first week of class. There is nothing like getting them hearing your voice and getting to know a little bit about you and realizing that you're not really that scary and, all that, and that you care about them. So I think that's another strategy that faculty can have. Okay, so she sends this to us, and she tells us what she's done. And she says that Joe has missed his assignment, and she might even say Joe keeps missing assignments. She might put a little note and say Joe was doing better, but now he's doing back to that pattern again. And what we're going to do, we have a team, and there's going to be somebody who's assigned to her class, a trained student support person who understands her class. We used to do it by affiliate, but now we assign it by class. And this person will know that in Unit 4 that this is what the assignment is, because they deal with it every term. And so they're going to call up Joe and say, you didn't do your assignment, and what's going on? And Joe's going to say, I didn't understand it. And so the student might say, you know what, all you need to do is put it in the Dropbox. Do you not know how to use the Dropbox? And the student will walk them through it. Or he might say, I'm having a really bad week and I'm depressed. And so then we're going to refer him to somewhere else. We're going to refer him to appropriate counseling services on his campus or online services, and then we'll do a follow-up on that. Or he may say, I don't understand this at all, I'm about to give up. And so then we'll say, do you know about our tutoring services? And he'll say, no. And then, it goes from there. There are certain points in time, usually the second, third, fourth week of the term, where this team makes 600 phone calls a day. So it's a very big deal. It's very intensive. It's very busy. There are slower times. You get towards the end of the term, and that one student has already left by this time, remember, or the 3 if you're in a class of 30. Hopefully most of the other 4 are still hanging in there. But we have to do a lot of follow-up with these students as well. We also try to update the instructor. I'd like to see us do more with that. Do you feel like you get enough follow-through on that? I'm knowing how Joe was doing. Okay. Right. Good. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, but I'd still like us to have maybe a better database, I guess I'm thinking. But we'll talk about that soon because D2L is going to provide us with some really neat tools. I didn't attend that session today. I attended another one, but I've heard that before. Did anyone go to the D2L session about analytics today? Okay, good. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and you may be able to tell me some things. Yep, and that's where we're going now. Here in D2L is what we're going to be using soon instead of WebCT / Blackboard / all those things that we call it. We call it CourseDen at the University of West Georgia. All these processes that I just described to you that we do manually, we will be able to automate with D2L. And that is mostly good, but it's not perfect either, and I'll tell you why. I'm very excited about it because we're not going to miss any students now. There's no way we'll miss any students because we're just humans, and Christine James might overlook somebody and thought, oh, I thought Joe turned in something, but he really didn't. This won't let that happen. So what we'll do is we'll set up criteria, like in this example, when this student has not logged in for 5 days, then it's going to send out an email. And we can decide who it sends an email to. So it may send an email to Joe. Joe, your instructor is concerned about you, or I'm concerned about you. Or it could send it to the instructor, or it could send it to the support person, or it can send it to all three. We can make it do whatever we want it to do. And here's another example. We can say that Joe did not he did not pass his quiz, okay? So again, we can decide if we're going to create some sort of script that goes to Joe that says, we've got a problem here. Or it could just send it something to the support team so the support team knows to call Joe and say, what's happening here? And so there's a lot of little criteria in here, and I haven't used this yet. I've seen demonstrations, and I'm very excited about it. It'll probably also tell us things like if an instructor has disappeared for 2 or 3 weeks, because that's a big problem, and it happens once in 1,000 times, but it does happen on occasion, and we have to know that, obviously, and address that when that happens. And we try to keep track of that manually by going in, and we actually have someone who goes in, and part of their job is to count instructor postings each week so that they can see if there's a problem, if something's happened. Because if an instructor does disappear, if someone's not watching for that, we may not know it until it's too late, until those students have gotten too far that they've gotten behind. Okay, so these are the good things. We can automate these processes, and then we can make sure no student is overlooked, and I really like that. But on the other hand, here are the things I'm worried about. I don't want us to rely so much on this. I mean, what we don't want to see is the same email going out to Joe every single week, okay? And then next term, he's in another class, and he's getting that same email. Well, he's going to put that in the spam folder before too long, all right? I'm getting another one of those emails. Well, I've got 6 of them today now, 1 for each of my classes. You know, so we've got to be creative with those. We have to change them. We have to change the scripts that we're making on those. You need a good writer to do that. I don't think just anybody can write these. The instructors will be writing some. We'll be writing some is the way I'm seeing it. Again, we haven't done it yet. I would love to see some research. And I imagine we'll do some. I'd love to see somebody else do it to actually compare in the first term of this. Comparisons between letting it be more automated versus making more phone calls. I want to see how that goes. My hunch is that the phone calls, that personal touch is still very important. I don't think that this system can evaluate its own efforts. Again, we're going to have to evaluate it and see how it's working, and some of that's going to be very qualitative. And again, it's not going to be able to give an out-of-the-box response. It's not going to be able to say, when it says, Joe, you missed this assignment. We're concerned about you. Do you need tutoring? Do you need da-da-da? And Joe has alcoholism. It's not going to know that. It's not going to respond to that. It's not going to help Joe with that. So, all right. Number 5, promote effective teaching strategies. We have to, I think after these days here, if you haven't got it by now, we really have to look at what instructors are doing in the classroom and not focus. I mean, I know it's a struggle. We have to focus on scholarship. There's a lot of things we have to focus on. We have to do our community work. But how can we really feel like somebody thinks it's important for us to spend our time calling these students and doing things that engage students, okay? So I would like to see evaluations. I would love to see an evaluation that said, a student evaluation that said, this is the best teacher I've ever had, and how strongly they agree with it. And if somebody gets a high score on that, that should be rewarded somehow. And I don't have the answers for that. In ECOR, we can do something like that. But system-wide, university-wide, even departmental-wide, this has to be important. Nobody cares until now, until Complete College Georgia, in my opinion, about really good teaching that makes a big difference. Am I off base on that? Do you agree or disagree? I mean, yeah, I remember when we started talking about this in ECOR 3 years ago, and Christine, you know this. In ECOR, we have a place called the Garden of ECOR where faculty communicate online, all right? And we have a anonymous forum there, which is wonderful, wonderful. It's called the Secret Hedge. And faculty go in there and they fuss and fuss and fuss about all kinds of things. And it's great because they feel free to say things. And one of the things that they fussed about, particularly in the beginning, was, this is not my job to hold these students' hands. And they're like, and they would say, where does Melanie Clay come up with this stuff? You know, it's like I just made all this up. So and now it's great because I'm not such a weirdo anymore, you know, for saying you need to reach out to these students. I'm not as strange as I was thanks to things like this. So, again, we have to have instructor training that does this. And this is something that we can mainstream across the board. The CTLs. I would love to see certification programs that focus on how to really engage students and how important it is for an instructor to be engaged in their success. All right, we just talked about this. And okay, here's an example. I had actually talked about this back at the summit, but here's an example of something that was actually on the secret hedge I was talking about in ECOR. Christine, did you write this? No, look, she's gonna. This was when we were talking about how you need to, what we're talking about right now. And somebody says, I plan to go to each of my students' houses to make sure their virus protection up to date, they're eating good breakfast, their work areas are ergonomically healthy, and then we'll bake cookies. After I tuck them in, I'll make sure their alarm clocks are set for the right time the next morning so they don't have to worry about getting themselves up to meet their responsibilities. A little kiss on the cheek and good night. So that's the kind of stuff I deal with, right? You know, it's really very funny. And so I wrote them back. We had in our train, that was actually not in the secret hedge. That was actually in their training program because they have to take a 2-week training program before they can teach online. And they can't miss a day. Not one day can they miss, or they can't teach, or that's what we tell them. So I said, as of this morning, there are 11 ECOR faculty who have not yet logged into this course. And they should have, right? Or else they're fired. I assume there's miscommunication, mere forgetfulness, or some other benign unknown. Thus, we will attempt to call all of these faculty this morning and get them on board. We have a clear vested interest in their success. So that quieted that down real quickly because, you know, they were doing that too. And that's why I think it's important that everyone actually take an online class. Here's an example. I've shown this in another presentation, but just another example. You want people to say this about you as an instructor when somebody says, who's the best instructor you ever had? Or who was one of the best? And you want them to say, an unfailing taskmaster who demanded our very best at every turn, and a kind and loving soul who would pick us up, dust us off, and comfort us when we were not our best. So that's the kind of thing you want. They're the ones who care enough to spend the time and find a way to engage each and every student. Patient, never giving up. So you've got to really breathe this. All right. Instructor commitment to student success. Yes. Oh, that's okay. Oh, yes, absolutely. Please. I'm tired of talking. Or you're talking about the 4 you're concerned, because remember 5 of them are going to do something, no matter what. All right, 1 of them you can't do anything about. But those 4, is that what you're asking? What do you do about those 4? You think they're not going to do anything if we're helping them along? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to skip to one real quick, and then I'm going to let Christine James answer this. I'm going to skip to this one. This one's important. Instructor focus on learning outcomes. Learning outcomes rather than other life lessons. I teach political science. I teach a hybrid course, and I will have, say I have a student who didn't turn in this. Okay, they had to do, let's say they had to do a one-page paper, all right? And I'm like, you didn't do that. And it's like, well, I really had this bad, they all had the bad, my grandmother, all that. And so then I'm going to say, I really want you to make this up. So I'm going to let you do a presentation for our class, a 5-minute presentation on this subject. And whatever I give them to do is going to be a little bit harder, okay? So you could say, my goodness, you gave this student another chance. He needed to learn that he couldn't do this. Just because he's an athlete, then he can't do this because he's got to learn, he's got to be responsible. Where in my learning outcomes did it say that I've got to teach him that lesson? It didn't say a thing about it. It says I have got to teach him about political science. So I want him to meet the learning outcome, the ones that I have listed, not those other ones that somebody said. I mean, that's somebody else's job. He's got plenty of chances to learn how tough life is, believe me. I don't have to teach him that. I can talk about it, I can preach about it, but I'm going to help him meet the learning outcomes. I don't care, but me personally, I don't care how many chances it takes, how many phone calls it takes. By the time he gets out of my class, he's going to have a good grade because he's had so many chances, and he's going to get it right and know it by the time. He's going to know every outcome when he leaves my class. So that's my opinion. Christine, do you have... It's very easy to get lost in an online class, and she's exactly right. Yeah, I went to the best university in the world, which is the Ohio State University. So, yeah, you did too? Good, yes. We have to remember that we are in Georgia, and a lot of us went to Georgia institutions. A lot of us went to the best institution in the world, or ones that are almost as good. And we have to get over our elitism, okay? We have to realize that this is Georgia, and Houston Davis presented some hard, cold facts, and if we're going to make some progress, we have to move beyond that and realize who our population is, who those 4 students are, where they've come from, how our efforts are going to make a difference way beyond them even getting a college degree or getting through our class. There's a butterfly effect. It's going to make a huge difference. It's going to change the whole face of this state. It's going to change this cycle of poverty and imprisonment, literal imprisonment, okay? We've got a lot of good forces going on right now, and I'm getting off on my little political science slant, but there's a why to all this. Your book that came in your bags, I started reading that, and it was all about the why, but there's a why that goes, but it's not just pass this class. It starts with that learning objective. It starts with us reaching out, but there's a big picture that changes everything that we're doing and how we live in the state that our children and grandchildren live in this state. So I'm very passionate about it. All right, let's move back. Instructor commitment to student success needs genuine buy-in, okay? And that's going to take some time for everybody to understand the why that we're doing this, why that we're holding hands as some people see it, or why we're providing encouragement or doing things differently than what was done to us, okay? But if you look back at your best instructors ever, you're going to see a mixture of high expectations and somebody who you felt like, was concerned about you as a person and got the big picture of everything. But they can fake it till they make it, okay? We can do some training programs, and we do that with ECOR, where, instructors sign an MOU, and they have certain behaviors that they're supposed to exhibit and they do that, and then one day they're like, you know what, this isn't so horrible after all to actually do that, and this actually maybe is working just a little bit. ECOR is different because instructors teach it more or less on an overload basis. They are scheduled term to term. If they don't do well and can't be remediated, then online teaching may not be for them, and they don't have to do that anymore, and we may not schedule them again. That's not the case in your regular academic department, okay? It's a lot harder to make that change, but I think that at department head levels, at dean levels, and even that's a place to start. If I were an academic department chair, I would have these discussions in my department, particularly for online learning, and I would set up some parameters for online teaching and say you will respond to students within 24 or 48 hours. You will do this and this, and I would have the faculty agree on it. Yes, a question. No, I do not have it with me, but please email me. I'll leave my cards up here, and I'll send you anything you want. I'm happy to share. Okay, this is something else we know. Most at-risk students, this is very important because we have a lot of these students in Georgia. We have a lot of first-generation students. We have research after research that shows that they're genuinely intimidated by you as faculty members. They are scared to death of you. And you're thinking, well, why didn't they just come up and talk to me? They don't see you like you see each other, or how you think they should see you, or how you saw your instructors at The Ohio State University. They see you as something that they cannot approach no matter how nice you are, okay? And this is something to remember about this population. There's going to be 2 of those 4 students probably fall into this group. Here's one of the instructor behaviors that's very important. Very, very important. Quality, timely feedback. Timely, that means very, very quick. I know we've all taken a class at some point in time where you got your only grade at the end of the term. I mean, I'm not sure what that does, but in the online environment, it needs to be very quick. It needs to be within 4 or 5 days, ideally. And you need to have some feedback that's substantive and tells them really how to improve. And finally, it has to be encouraging. Even if they've really messed it up, you need to take some sort of sandwich approach where you say, Joe, thanks for trying this. I can see that you've got some good ideas, but you really addressed this in a way that's not clear to me, blah, 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 and then you go on in there. And your grammar has some issues here. Please do this or that. And then you close it up with something encouraging again. And but that's extremely important. And it's literature over and over and over ties quality, timely feedback in the online environment back to student success. And we just talked about instructor focus on learning outcomes. And that's when I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, I would have paid you to ask that question because I love that answer that we have on this because it's so important. Next, we have stellar course design. This is very important too. I know that if you've taken online courses, you've seen that some are really wonderful and make a lot of sense, and others don't make so much sense, and you get lost. And I actually think that the D2L environment, by its very nature, is going to provide some benefits there. I think that it's much simpler in the way that it looks. It's not as busy as Blackboard is, and I'm really welcoming that. It's going to be a lot more intuitive for the user. But then we also have instructional design as well. One of the biggest problems, and I mentioned this yesterday, that we see is an overzealousness of faculty to make sure that their online course is of quality when they're developing it. So they put everything in they just dump stuff, and then put some more stuff and some more stuff, and have way too many assignments that have very little to do with the learning outcomes, or that look at the learning outcomes 5 or 6 times. Keep the course simple, address the learning outcomes. Think very carefully when you're putting things in there, and can they find it? Here is the last one on my list. This is really, really, really critical, particularly if you're an administrator like I am and running an online program. You have to rely on all the data all the time for all of your decision making. And you have to realize that you're never, ever there. And that's kind of what Craig Brown and I, when he came in, I said, we look at it every day. I mean, I think yesterday I sent out another email asking something about what are the ABCs for this school, and why did it, what happened this summer compared to last. Everything should be about data. You really can't make good decisions with this if you're not assessing everything from the grades, comparing them to face-to-face courses, we compare like English 1101 and ECOR to the face-to-face 1102, say they take the series and they move around. That's very important to do. You also, of course, want to look at student satisfaction, because that is very important to course completion. And it's something you're just doing constantly, so I can't emphasize that enough. And let me, I do like to have prizes before we move to questions. I always do something kind of crazy like that. So I bought some pralines, and we're going to have a little quiz real quick. I think I've got like 3 questions. And and they're related to this, and we will have a tie, and I have a couple of tiebreakers. So here is an article that was just posted in the Online Journal of Distance Learning Administration, which is the best online journal in the world. It's kind of like the Ohio State, and I am the founder and editor of that journal. According to Boston, Ice, and Burgess, who are from American Public University System, which of these factors is most important in online student retention? And you're going to write down on your piece of paper or in your mind, you're going to keep your own score, and we're going to do the good old honor system. Do you think it's age, gender, military membership, or satisfactory grades? Does everybody have their answer in their virtual space somewhere? Okay. Who said that it's age? Who said gender? That's a good answer, but that's not it. Who said military membership? And who said satisfactory grades? Yes, satisfactory grades is very important. In their article, they talk about how they realize that there's this whole group of students, particularly non-traditional students, who start college, but they're not really starting. They're not thinking about the degree. They're going, I'll go back to college and see how this goes. Okay, and they see, oh, maybe it's not going so well. Okay, so they don't come in with thinking there's an end. They come in with, let's see how it goes. So it's very important in these first experiences with non-traditional students, when they stick their toe in the water, to try to make it a positive experience and to help them make some progress. All right, here's the second one. Harvard University just released a report stating that online students who engage in this type of tutoring fare better. Which type of tutoring? Right, online students, let's pretend they're ECOR students. Do they need face-to-face tutoring on their affiliate campuses? Do they need online tutoring, or is there no significant difference? Who says A? Who says B? And who says C? Okay, it's B. This is really interesting, and this just came out in the last few weeks. Online tutoring was superior for the online student than face-to-face tutoring. So this is something we could probably have a whole nother session about. So some people in here have 2 points, so keep up with that in your mind. That's 1, 2. And then the third one, most University of West Georgia ECOR students who withdraw from their, and that should actually be university system, not University of West Georgia, who withdraw from their courses report that they do so because of A, personal life issues, B, instructor issues, or just a general dislike of online learning. Who thinks it's A? And who thinks it's B? And who thinks it's C? And why does Houston Davis not have to vote? Okay. 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 So the answer is personal life issues. Personal life issues, and that is actually something that we can do something about, believe it or not. The vast majority say that they moved or they got sick or something happened, and it is personal life issues. Who got 3 of those correct? How many of you did? Is that just 3 of you? That's it? Okay, well, we don't have to have a tiebreaker. I was going to have to ask you the total number of points in the Braves game last night. Does anybody know that? Yeah, that's right. Who'd they play? Okay. Good for you. All right. Braves game, okay, yeah, it is. You're right. I have 3 prizes for you all, but now we have a few minutes left for questions. And I know y'all just have tons of them, right? Yes. I know the ratio of, there's a set number of support staff. There should be 1 person for every 500 students for freshman and sophomore online courses. That's going to be much higher when you go into graduate, way higher in graduate level. But at the lower level, you need 1 support person for every 500 students. Now, we have other people who are in other areas, such as instructional design, but it is because that's the area of growth that you have. Instructional design does not grow nearly as rapidly as student support does. Not nearly as rapidly. I mean, you develop the courses and you redesign them, but it's that student support that is by far the most costly in an online system. The next most costly piece is marketing, definitely. So how many students do you have who take fully online courses? Now, in a hybrid situation, you shouldn't need that. That should really fall on the instructor when they're having that hybrid meeting. But how many fully online students do you have at the undergraduate level in a term? Do you know? Okay. 400 or 500? Okay. And I do, some of those individuals that I'm talking about, some of them do have other roles, so one of them that might be part of their role, okay? Or there might be somebody that I feel needs to learn something about this, and I'll assign them a couple sections for a year. But generally speaking, you need 1 to 500, and we kind of figured that out by trial and error. And then I was reading University of Nebraska, which is another great institution, by the way. That's where I got my doctorate. But University of Nebraska, I was reading their report about online learning, and they actually wrote that very recently that you needed 1 to 500. And so what we found by trial and error has been verified by someone else. So I really believe that's the magic number. Again, it's different in graduate courses. Do we have any more questions? Yes. Well, one of the biggest pieces is before someone can teach for ECOR, even if they've taught online for years and years, they have to take our specific course. And in the old days, before we had the administrative responsibility for it, it focused on the technology. And 10 years ago, you really needed to be focusing on technology when we were all getting into this because nobody knew any of that. All right, and we still have technology training, but it comes more as an option, and it comes later, okay? And it comes when we have one-on-one and just-in-time support for things like that. But what we do is we focus, first of all, on the memorandum of understanding and make sure they, understand what they've signed there and that they agree to do and what this means. And then we really get into some content and some articles and discussions about how you can support students and what our expectations are and what they should do and what the instructor's role is. Okay, so that's a lot of the the training that we have, and then we have that ongoing discussion in the garden of ECOR, where we talk about student success issues, and we talk about general issues. There's course content groups in there, like philosophy has their little group, and their little own discussion board where they can talk about problems in the class. They can say, why are all our students doing so bad in Unit 8 over and over? Something's wrong with this. Something is wrong with this assignment. And they can say that, and then the instructional designers will see that, or they will call them, and they'll work together to find another assignment, find out why that assignment is so bad. How can we meet those learning outcomes? Like we had a big discussion in math, and math's always a challenge. And one of the things that we ended up doing was putting videos in the class. If there's a midterm coming up, there was a practice test and the video that showed how to work each and every one of those problems. These are simple things, but you have to realize that they take a lot of time, and you're never there. If you're at 82%, you're like, how can we get here? Why do we have so many D's? How do we get those up to B's? So it's constant, it's ongoing, but it's really not just about online learning. It's just different. I think some of the practices that we have in online learning, because we're always having to prove ourselves in online learning, as you know, I think we're going to see them become more mainstreamed, and that's a welcome change. Yes.
You talked a little bit about the intelligent agents.
Yes. Those are excellent questions. First of all, I'm not afraid. Okay, not afraid. I'm actually very much looking forward to this, and I think that I don't have any of those answers. My plan is to try. I wonder about all of those, and I do think the faculty have to have their hands in it. I hired somebody at a pretty high level last year, and the individual said, we need someone to do all our analyses for us because we have so much data, you need to bring somebody in. And it bothered me, and I said, I've got to think about that. And so then I asked my deputy provost, I said that conversation happened, and he said, if you're in a leadership position or if you don't have your hands in the data, it's not the same if you're not doing it, if you're just looking at it. And I like that's exactly what I knew, and I just couldn't figure out why it was bothering me. And I think that's what's bothering me a little. And you say, fear that if the faculty don't have their hands in it, if they're not touching it and feeling it, then they'll become disengaged from it. So we will find an answer to that, but I think it's next spring comes here, and we'll have to come up with some systems that maintain that save time, allow us to find all the students, but keep the personal touch in it as well. But that's a great question. Yes. Anybody else?
Do you have any plans to add more courses to the course?
We do. There was an entire, Mike Rogers can answer this better. He knows the history. There was an entire array of courses that were approved, and several of them were never developed, and we are now we've put all of those in the queue to be developed. And then after that, we're probably going to even look at some area Fs as well, in some very general type of areas that will work with whatever works with Complete College Georgia, other collaborative programs. Watch as these initiatives unfold and how we can better serve those.
In terms of dropout rates, are the chemistry and the physics tend to be the most challenging simply because of I've heard from students the lab costs or the lab kits for chemistry. That tends to be the area where we see the students shy away the most from the details in the lab.
Yes, physics and chemistry, I would say absolutely. There are some instructor variables, though, and that's something that we study. We really look at when you've got this instructor, even in chemistry, who's consistently got 82% student success, and this one who's got 40. You go, what's the difference here? What's going on? And we even try to get them to talk to figure out what's going on. So generally speaking, the answer is correct. Physics, low enrollments, doesn't, from a business standpoint, doesn't break even for anybody, but we maintain it as an option. So Spanish is also a little bit difficult, more so than average. So, any more? And math, of course. Yes. Okay. Now, David, I'm going to, let me warn you here. I'm going to tell you about it. But what we have for ECOR is different than what we have for UWG Online. Okay? Okay. The staff for ECOR, there is one. We started out 3 years ago. We started out with 2 instructional designers for ECOR, and now we have another part-time person as well. Okay. UWG Online may actually have more, but they're mostly graduate assistants. Graduate assistants are UWG Online is probably more like what you're doing, and we have a lot of student assistants who do helpline and some of the student support for UWG Online, and for instructional design we have a lot of graduate assistants. There are some full-time people. So a collaborative gets more complicated, I would say. You're dealing with faculty all over the place, and they can't just drop in and see you. So it's a little bit more complicated. It's scalable. In a lot of ways, in most ways, it's very scalable, so you can do a lot more. Because there's 3,000 students sometimes in ECOR, and that's a lot. Okay, so it's very, very scalable, but at the same time, I would say it's different. But just because it's more, the relationships are different. Okay, we actually have more nimbleness, though. Mike Rogers, do you have a question? No, you don't. Okay. Okay. Oh, yes, there's one more.
How do you try to assess student learning outcomes when you have instructors who one might be waiting?
Okay. We developed a system, very comprehensive, complex system for student outcomes. You could probably talk about that too, Christine. They're called COLAs, and every outcome is mapped back to the Gen Ed curriculum. Okay, and then every outcome is in the course and is mapped to an assignment or to a test or to a specific question on a test or a discussion. And there's a big grid that's we have on paper and that we also have within the course. And this instructor actually goes in and puts in the percentages based on the grades of who exceeded expectations on this assignment associated with this learning outcome, who met them, and who failed to meet them. So we keep those, and then we actually look at those to make course improvements and document those and for accreditation. And then we provide all that data to the affiliates, and so we can pretty much hand them everything they need for accreditation. Does that help? Good. Any more? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much. Oh, and if you got some candy, please come up and see me and get it. Thank you.